Today we have a very special session class because we have arrived at the halfway midpoint of the book of Exodus. And if you remember, we keep saying that the book of Exodus is divided to two very distinct parts, right? The first part is leaving Egypt. The second part is the reason we left Egypt. And what was the reason? To worship God. So the second part of the book of Exodus is all dedicated to the building of the temple, building the tent of meeting, what will be the sanctuary of God on earth. So this is today we're starting that second part. Now, some would say the book of Exodus has also a pivotal part in between the two main parts. And of course, it's a very important point. This is the revelation in Sinai that we just went through. So it you could say this is the transition between slavery and freedom. You could. You could also say it's part of the leaving Egypt or part of the worshiping. So either way, Mount Sinai, the experience kind of stands in the middle between those two parts. But today we're starting the part of building the sanctuary of God on earth. Now think about it. We now take it for no, because we've lived thousands of years later. This event was 3,336 years ago, roughly. Well, some would say exactly, but I would say, around. So, 3,500 years ago, what was changed? Because the main question is, why is it that different than building a temple to an idol god? Right? What's the difference? I mean, it's not like this was the first sanctuary that was built to a god. Now, I think it's important to reiterate that the word God in Hebrew, El, now God has different names, right? Adonai, Elohim, El Shaddai, I mean, the different names. But the general name for God, Elohim, or El, is a general name for power. So any power, when God tells us you shall not have any other gods, Elohim Acherim, he doesn't mean necessarily the creators. He means don't worship any other force as strong as it might be. Like, the sun is a very strong force. And maybe a lot of pagan societies worship the sun. Yes, it's an amazing power, but it's still not the power, right? The God. Money. People worship money. Okay, of course, money is a very powerful tool, very powerful element, but should we worship it? No. So it's the same thing. So up until now, all the shrines or the sanctuaries that were built for God or gods in this world had a different purpose than what we are going to start now. So the question that we have to also remind ourselves before we understand the structure and the foundation of what it means to bring heaven to earth and contain it. How can you contain heaven on earth? Right? You're building a house, essentially. What was the purpose of the beginner, the person who started, the entrepreneur of Judaism? what was Abraham, right? What was his purpose? How was he different than all the other shamans and priests and religious people in this world? There's one main distinction.
The covenant with God.
The covenant with God. The what? The one God. Very good. So if there's one God, because up until then there were many gods. So by default, if you have many gods, it means that they have their own territory. So even if we take the Greek mythology, right? So you have the god of the sea, the god of love, god of they have territories, even if they're not physical territories, they have sections that they are in charge of.
Dominions.
Dominions. The God that Abraham decided that he is going to worship was different because he was not limited by time, space, or any philosophy. He was the all-encompassing God. And that's the difference. That's the difference. All the gods until now, you went to I don't know, Nineveh, right? Nineveh had its own god. Once you left Nineveh and you went to the next town over, they had their god. Okay.
So what Abraham is experiencing now is that this God is big. He's still in his domain, even though he went through many nations on his journey to the promised land. He starts in what's today Iraq and goes up all the way into Turkey and then down into the Holy Land. And so he is experiencing that this God is big. And he has control even in this area, not just that area. So there's a learning going on here that, and God is revealing himself. You know, we could imagine a lot of things, and pagans imagined a lot of things and said, okay, that's powerful, that's powerful, that's powerful. But I always like to give the example, the farmer who goes and prays to the sun god. And he plants his seeds, and but they don't grow so good. Oh, I forgot to pray to the rain god, so I got to run to his place and light a candle. But then am I offending the sun god? Am I pleasing the rain god? So you're always living on thin ice. You know, so humanity couldn't even progress. You know, which god? They're always worried about which god am I offending. Which God am I pleasing? Oh my gosh, oh my, So you're always crazy. So the oneness of God really brings humanity to another level. Now we just have to deal with this one. Okay, let's figure this out. And then once he reveals himself as the God of order, then I can trust that when I plant my seeds, you know, in the spring, that's the time to do it. So God is revealing himself, and we are progressing as people, and not just dependent on if the tree grows or whatever. We're starting to, what the Jews come up with is that God is the God of order. And so that we can plan ahead, we can begin to think, we can begin to reason that the universe is intelligible. It's not chaos. So we have to start finding out the laws of nature, the laws of God. And now we can create a society. It's not going to be just happenstance and chaos. So of course the evil one it's chaos, and God brings order. So
yes, so it means that whatever we see in this world, even if we don't understand it on the surface, there's order. That there's a hand, the prime mover. That there's a prime mover behind everything. So it's integrated. The word integration, one God, is very important for what, like Father Roy said, the psyche of a person, right? You don't like run around chasing it. The first time I visited Tbilisi in Georgia, my friends showed me around, and they were very proud of something that the mayor did. The mayor of Tbilisi, they built a building, and instead of having all the governmental offices in different places of the city, they integrated them into one place. So think of like the Social Security office, and then the employment office, and then the IRS, and all these offices that you have to go to, they were in one building. And they said, we're very proud of it because it really changed the lives of the people here, the citizens into that integration. So think about it maybe that way too. So that integration, so as Father Roy said, Abraham discovered, right, that and it was mutual, of course. The God of heaven also discovered Abraham, but that meeting was to say, I can now go from Nineveh to the next town, and I'm going to be speaking to the same God. And I always give that example for me, how my faith also strengthened was when I was speaking to God in Jerusalem before I moved to New York. And then when I moved to New York, I realized that it was the same God I was speaking to in Jerusalem. And it was and because there were things happened to me that I knew that it had to be the same God, because otherwise it would be too much of a coincidence, right? So I realized, oh wow, that I had that experience of the oneness of God. For me, New York at the time was so far away, but for God, everything is here and now. So that's really the idea. So think of now, with this preface, how would you design a place for a God that is infinite, right? But because God is infinite and like big or everywhere, but God is also no thing. All the other gods and shrines were physical, right? The famous story of Abraham, and we have to go back to Abraham because it's just now it's the next step of Abraham's relationship with God. Now just the children of Jacob, Isaac, and Abraham. So there's a famous story of his father before they left Ur Kasdim, where they had to run away because everybody was idol worshiping, and they were not. They realized they had a revelation and awakening, and so they were very different, and they really had to run for their lives. So the famous story is that Abraham's father was the biggest idol maker. So think he had a big store that everybody came to buy the idols from. So it sounds ironic that really the entrepreneur of the one God, the monotheism in the world, his father was the biggest idol seller. No, a lot of times it's like that. When you realize something and you come out of the society. So one day, Abraham already figured this whole thing about the one God, and that these idols are made of wood and stones. And like in Psalms, when we read, when God said, you worship idols that have eyes but can't see, right? And ears and can't hear. So when his father went away one time, Abram was in charge of the store, and he decided to do something very radical, and he broke all the idols. Can you imagine the financial loss for his father? But he kept one idol. He kept the biggest idol that was in the back. And his father came back, and he was shocked. He said to Abram, what did you do? He's made of wood. And Abram said to him, listen to what your mouth is saying. And that was the moment of the aha moment of Abram's father too, that realized, you know what? We're living a lie. These idols are not gonna help us when we need them. You know, in the movie The Ten Commandments with Charleston Heston, there's a scene, and again, I've watched it several times, but you always discover new things. There's the scene when after the plague of the firstborn, and Pharaoh sits with like the pietà. He holds his son in his hand, and he's crying and he's mourning him, and he's praying to the big God that is behind him, like, help me here. And of course, there's no help. So that is the understanding that the God who created the world has no body. Okay. Now I'm putting this aside, of course, of the word became flesh later on for Catholics, and I understand that, but think of but still, even for Christians, right? The Son begotten a body, but the Father is still in heaven and still, right, is amorphic. So how do you contain now a God that is everywhere but is nowhere? That really is the dichotomy that we live in. So now we will start reading chapter 25 in Exodus, and it's on page 445. And we will discover something very important. How you contain something that is everywhere and nowhere. So before we go there, where would you house, and how would you house something like that? There's no wrong answer. There are, but don't worry about it.
Couldn't you say that God then is existence itself?
Okay, God is the existence itself. That's very good. Okay.
But we couldn't say though, what means pantheism. Pantheism is the idea that God is in the creation. So everything is God. God is everything. So God is a tree, and he's a person, and he's a bush, and he's a this and a that, and he's in the sun, and that's pantheism. So there's no separation between God and creation. But Jews and Christians believe that there is separation. God is separate from his creation. So
yeah.
I'm not saying that he's created.
Exactly. He's existent. That's why that's a very good. That's why I said I agreed with you.
Yeah.
Not if you would have said he's creation itself, I would have disagreed with you. But you
say pantheism. That's the other.
Yeah, you said existence.
Existence.
So let's now think of ourselves as human beings. Our existence, right? So where is our existence? Where is our existence?
In space and time.
By
It's in space and time.
Space and time, okay. In our body, where are we, so to speak? The heart. Okay, very good. Now the heart, by the way, when the Torah speaks about the heart, it refers to the mind too. Okay? So that the heart is really an extension of the mind, that they're built together. There's an expression that the heart and again, take it the Talmud tells us that the heart is like it's like the pimp, and the mind is the prostitute. Okay, that's what I said. Okay, take it because like when we prostitute ourselves, right? We do things without limits, right? So the heart is the solicitor of that. Okay, so they work together. The heart and the mind have a relationship. So the heart. So this is where it all begins, with the heart. And then we'll see here how everything from now on in the relationship with God, the I and thou, the heaven and earth, and we'll see how it's also built, and the structure of the temple itself, the tent of meeting, is built all around the heart. Just like the human being is built around the heart, the temple and the world and the relationship with God is all about the heart. Now, when we speak about life also from the Jewish perspective, when people say, where does life begin or when, right? So I know for Catholics it's conception, but for us it's not. It's really 40 days after conception, and that's about the first heartbeat, and then life ends with the heartbeat, because that's really what it's about. And I can go into it even deeper, but the heart pumps the blood. So the heart is the connection between heaven and earth. How is it translated in our body, the heaven and earth? We have the body, right? And we have the breath. The breath is heaven and the body is earth. How can heaven and earth live together? Because heaven is all movable. It doesn't have a container. The body is inanimate. If it doesn't have the soul, it's just going to be just a block of, right? Just an inanimate object. But when you have something that's immovable and something that constantly moves, how do they live together? They need a mechanism to live together. And God tells us in the Torah that the soul, meaning heaven, lives in the blood. That's why we're not supposed to eat blood. So what does that mean? It means that it's a compromise. The blood is physical, but yet it keeps moving. The minute it stops moving, that's death. Which means that we can't live without the soul. The purpose of life, the purpose of us leaving Egypt, was so we can inject Sinai, we can inject God, heaven, into our lives. The minute we stop that, we are like a block of meat. So everything is in the heart, and that's what it's going to be built from. Okay, yes, Manny.
That's what the belief is, what happens to the soul when it leaves.
I don't want to get into that now because then it's a different subject, but the soul is infinite. It's the breath of God. It does not go, it doesn't die, because that's the definition of life. Soul, when God created man and injected the soul into him, the breath, the Torah tells us that is when the human being became a human being, became a living person. All right, so without the breath, without heaven, we're not alive, really. Okay, even if we can breathe, but if we don't live. Okay, so page 445, and this is it. The parasha begins, that chapter 25 begins also a portion that we call the portion of teruma. You'll see it in the book there. What is teruma? Teruma is donation. There's one more thing I need to say about the sanctuary of what we believe, the God that we believe in, is that it was built movable. That was an indication that God is really everywhere but nowhere. And when King David wanted to build the fixed temple, the prophet Nathan comes back to him and says, God doesn't want you to build a fixed temple. He's happy dwelling in a tent and moving between his children. So eventually it was fixed, but even when it was fixed, God tells us that when the holy ark should always be ready to move and never move the handles, the staves that were part of the ark. It's the only holy vessel that even when the ark comes to a permanent place, the handles should stay ready to move. Okay, so we can get to it when we get to the construction of the ark.
Rabbi,
Yes.
Talking about the tent, was that done for pragmatic purposes because they were on the move, or was that done for to please basically the Torah's right?
So it's a very good question, and it is a good segue. The question is, was it just practical that it should be movable because they're in the desert, they're moving anyway, right? Everything in the Torah has practical level and the spiritual level. Everything. Why? Because in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Okay, so everything is heaven and earth. A human being is heaven and earth, body and spirit. So everything in this world is both. The practical manifestation doesn't mean it's not holy. When we wash our dishes, it's not just because they're dirty and we need to prepare them for the next meal. It's because we clean them so we can eat and bless God. So every practical thing that we do in our life has a heavenly purpose. Okay, so that's a very good point. So just like the ark, when it says don't remove the handles, so some would say practically, if somebody is attacking you and you need to remove, or you need to get into go to war now, it has to be always ready to move. Yes, practically, of course, there's that aspect. But then the spiritual aspect is, don't ever make the holy ark another idol, another statue. Understand that it has to move with place and time. Because if you walk with God, you always walk, you're ready, you have to be ready to move. That's what walking with God, right? Enoch that walked with God, all the people, and God took him, right? All the walking with God is one step at a time without knowing the final destination. Abraham, right? God told him, go to the land I will show you. And Okay, he didn't tell him exactly where that land. So that really is to get out of a fixed life. Living with God, the creator of the world, is challenging. You have to, because you can't see, touch, smell, and so forth. But at the end, if you know how to connect to that God, you connect to the infinite. Okay, so very good. So the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and let them take me a portion from every man whose heart motivates him. You shall take my portion." Okay? So portion in Hebrew is turuma, and turuma means donation. Um, I would translate as donation. Sometimes translations don't really, it is a portion, but really, it's not a mandatory tax. It's not something that God now forces the people to give. If your heart moves you, you shall give. And then, of course, God will say what he needs in order to have to dwell on earth. Think of, I always give this example of like the president, right? The president he's invited, he's not forcing himself, let's say, to visit India, right? But if he's invited by the prime minister of India, this is what the president of the United States requires in order to come to visit India. He needs place for the entourage, security, certain amount of rooms, and there's a protocol for the president to visit another place. So there's a protocol, very specific protocol for the heavenly God, right, to visit earth, to dwell on earth. And of course, we'll look through it for the next of the half of the book of Exodus. Yes.
Well, you brought up many interesting questions. I've been trying to hold back until the end to ask questions.
Yeah.
But this also kind of reminds me of like what God is saying is that he doesn't want to force you to do anything. He wants you to do it because you love him and that you want him to be part of, that you want him to be part of his family.
Mm-hmm.
And we can bring it into like the New Testament where when Jesus sent out the disciples and he said, if they don't want to hear about it, just go to the edge of the town and then shake the dust off their feet and keep on going to the next thing. So that to me is like where, again, the Old Testament and the New Testament basically connect so well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, Jesus was Jewish and he was looking
But
at
the only other thing that I was trying to hold back about is like with Iran, we were just talking about like the Islamic state that it is. But I'm led to believe, and you brought it up when you said that like the founding fathers of Judaism basically went through that area. Okay, and if I'm not mistaken, Zoroastrianism started there or there?
Yes.
And that is
Still
a
there.
it's
It's sort of a monotheist. It's not exactly monotheist. It's dualist. They believe in the good side and the bad side that are fighting.
Right.
But we don't say that. We say, yes, God created opposition, but it's still under him. The opposition is still under God. They don't believe that. They believe that these are two independent powers. And that's the main difference between. So I want to concentrate on your first comment that what God is asking us by saying donate it, and if your heart moves you, is we have to understand this. We have to unpack this. Yes, the ultimate relationship with God is through love. And we say the Shema, the prayer of Shema twice a day. You should love your God with all your heart, with all your might and all your power. Of course, love is the first thing. So you want to do that. But the relationship with God is like marriage. So the people of Israel, when they came to Mount Sinai, that was the marriage between God and the people of Israel. That was the covenant, right? But once you have the covenant, you are committed. So you don't have to marry your wife, but once you're married, you have obligations, right? So that really is and in a sense, the relationship that we have with God is closer to the Catholic marriage, that there are no divorce. In the Torah, there's divorce. You can divorce, right? But what Jesus was saying, you can't really divorce, even if you're divorced on paper. And you see a lot of couples who divorce on paper, but really, especially when you have children, it's very hard to really disconnect, right? So, but the marriage with God is forever. It's a covenant, but you have to buy into it. God does not force anybody to get into that marriage. Let's ask why. And that's a very important question for this. Why shouldn't God say, I'm forcing you now to marry me? I'm the king. I can force anybody to do anything. Free will. Good. Yeah, you said it. Because otherwise it's not a relationship. What kind of a relationship is it when everything is right commanded? So right. So this is the idea. So you need to buy into sharing a house with me, because think about it. Your home. It could be a house, the walls, right? But does it mean anything if it doesn't have love in it? And that's really the basis for the relationship. So it starts with a donation. If you want to, if your heart moves you, this is what I'm prescribing. Okay, so then this is the portion that you shall take from them. Now, the Talmud and the rabbis look at this word, and that's a good translation, take, right? You would have expected this to be a donation. You don't take, you give, right? But what it is you go around and you take their donation. So it's like Salvation Army, comes to your house and takes what you have put out to donate. So this is the portion that the donation that you shall take from them. And now it's prescribing. It says if you want the king of the universe to come and dwell among you, gold, silver, and copper, turquoise, purple, and scarlet wool, linen and goat hair, red dyed ram skins, tachash. We'll talk about what tachash means. Tachash skins, acacia wood, oil for illumination, spices for the anointment oil, and the aromatic incense, shoham stones, and stones for the setting of the ephod and the breastplate. Okay, so we'll have a chance to look at each item as we go, but this is now the most important verse.
And what's the ephod?
In the building. Ephod is the tunic that the high priest wore. We'll get to each of those holy vessels when we get to them. This is now verse 8 is the most important verse it's the foundational verse, and it's repeated many, 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 many times in Jewish conversations. It says, "They shall make a sanctuary for me, so that I may dwell among them." Okay? It doesn't say, "so I will dwell in it." in the sanctuary. Because the sanctuary is, yes, it is special. You make it holy. There's the Shekhinah, God's glory dwells there. But God is not there physically. So God is not dwelling there in the sanctuary. God is dwelling among them, meaning in the people. And where in the people? In the hearts. In the hearts of the people. So you give a donation, you open your heart, and physically from what I learned, the hand, when you the fist like this, is the size of your heart. And nothing is accidental or random in creation and the way we're created. It's a theological, we live in a theological world. So the language, creation, everything is for the purpose of connecting heaven and earth. So the hand, right, as when you open your hand, you open your heart. And in different places in the Torah, God tells us, don't close your hand and close your heart. He makes the parallel. So of course, when you give, because when you open your heart and you open your hand, it is the most important thing. Because what you're saying is, I can give now. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I can give now, but I trust that God will give me back. And actually, of all the 613 commandments, there's one commandment that God tells us in the Torah that we can test him on. One commandment. What is that commandment? What is it?
Love thy neighbor.
Love thy neighbor. Love thy neighbor. Sort of.
Do not covet.
What?
Do not covet.
No. Charity. Donations. Charity. And it's the tithing. More specifically, it's the tithing. So the word tithing in Hebrew is the 10%, ma'aser, the 10%, but it's the same word as make you wealthy, ma'asher. It's the same letters, same exact letters, just the one dot goes on a different side. But God tells us, you give to the poor, to the needy, and I will give you tenfold. You're giving 10, but I'll give you 10 times. So, and that's why I know many people who are very wealthy, and they keep this as like their, they don't veer from it. They know that their wealth was given to them because they keep giving donations. So that is the one commandment. So because it's faith, saying I'm not just going to hold it, I'm going to give it to the poor person, and then I know that God is going to give me what I need. Okay, so verse 9 says, like everything that I show you, the form of the tabernacle and the form of all its vessels, and so shall you do. So God tells Moses that the what they'll build now on earth is not something that they can hire an architect that will now be creative and figure out how they want to build it. There is actually, you're bringing heaven to earth, right? So there's a structure in heaven that you need to duplicate. It's the footstool of God on earth. It's the throne. So it needs to mimic the throne that God sits on in heaven on earth. Okay? So let's think of God, right? So we look at God and we say, God is holy, 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 right? What is the holiness? He's holy. And the temple in Jerusalem or the temple for God is in Hebrew is called the house of holiness. Beit HaMikdash, the house of holiness. Originally, it's the tent of meeting of heaven and earth, but it's the same, has another name, Beit HaMikdash, the house of holiness. And house doesn't mean just the structure. House means the system. Remember when we were talking about how Egypt is called a house of slavery? It wasn't just a house. Clearly, there were no walls there. It was the house of slavery. It's a system of slavery. And we're going from a house of slavery to a house of freedom. Building the house of God and being the slaves of God is freedom. Remember what we said when Moses received the Torah in Mount Sinai, the tablets with the engraved 10 Commandments, and the Talmud says, don't call it engraved, call it freedom, because the word for engraved in Hebrew is the same word as freedom. So if you have a structure, it has to be the right structure, of course, right? It'll give you freedom. You may see that as it's engraved, it's binding, it's supposed to give me, it's to limit me, right? Yes, in one sense it limits you, but it gives you the ultimate freedom. You know, people look at marriage as restricting, but actually it's the most freeing experience. Because now you don't have to keep searching, right? All day. You have a place and then you're free in many ways. So yes, there's always that trade-off. But in the right system, it gives you the ultimate freedom. Shabbat, the Sabbath. Yes, it's a limiting experience, so to speak, right? Because you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't go here, you can't go there. But the freedom, the spiritual freedom that it gives you is enormous, right? It's infinite. So God is telling us that structure has to fit me. God is holy. Holy means separate, right? I'm separate. I'm not going to be all with you. I'm going to be with you, but in a holy way, in a separate way. So God is holy, holy, holy. Kadosh, kadosh, kadosh. Exactly. So now the structure of the house of God on earth will mimic that. We'll have those three components. And we will see as we go along. It's very detailed. And some people get kind of lost and some may be bored in the detail. I love that. You'll discover things because I'm a frustrated architect. I wanted to be an architect my whole life. And God decided that I'll be an architect in a different way. I always say, God wanted me to first find out what the real foundations of a house or a home are before I build anything, right? So it's not about the physical before you need to first have the right blueprint. And this is really what God is telling us. I have the blueprint in heaven, and I want you to translate it into earth. And I'm going to now show you what it is, and you will build your personal life, your organizational life, your national life, your religious life, spiritual life, physical life, all your life and being around that structure. Give you another example of what is this structure. God always wants to give us infinity. wants to give us long life, infinite life. Doesn't want us to be lost in the physical life. Should use the physical life, enjoy it, sanctify it, absolutely. But don't get stuck on it, because there's an infinite. Use it to make your next home in heaven that is permanent and infinite. What was the last infinity that humanity had? Where was where was it that the Garden of Eden? The Garden of Eden. What did we have in the Garden of Eden? Why was it infinite in the Garden of Eden? And once we left the Garden of Eden, we were not infinite anymore, right? We had to regenerate through the generation to reproduce physically. What was there? Specifically, there was the tree of life. The tree of life. God can't create another God, because then it's God. Oh, well, you can say begotten, but okay, again, I need to remember this. But again, it's not another God, right? It's part of the same Trinity. So, but anything that God creates outside of him, right? The nature, the world, human beings, can't be God, right? So, which means that anything that God creates outside of himself cannot be infinite, cannot be eternal. So God placed a human being after he said, oh, this is very good. He loved the creation, that the human being that he created on Friday, at the last day. And he said, now, because I love it very much, I can put it next to my tree of life until it messed up, right? But I want this to last forever. And what gave us the infinity was our proximity to the tree of life. God said, now I'm going to give you that tree of life if you hold on to it in a different way. So the blueprint of the temple is it's the tree of life being planted again on earth.
Now, just one thing I just heard this Lent, and very cool. The parallels, again, always the Old and New Testament, the paralleling. So in Genesis, you have a garden, and you have the tree of life, and you have a man and a woman and fruit. So that they went to not the tree of life, but they went to the knowledge of good and evil, and they ate that. So it produced death. So once again, on Calvary, or in not Gethsemane, the garden, the tomb, the garden tomb. So you have and a tree right there. So you have a dead tree in a garden, a man and a woman, and the dead tree produces life. So it's an interesting parallels there all together. So it's amazing to.
What was the dead tree?
The cross.
Oh,
the dead tree, the cross.
That's what they called it a lot of times.
Yeah, the tree, hanging on the tree. Yeah.
In Hebrew, the word in the Torah, the word for tree and wood is the same word. There's no other word for that, so it used both. Good. So we understand now the foundations of this. The tent of meeting, what God wants to really, and God misses us. When he expelled us from the Garden of Eden, he was crying, right? He didn't want to do that. It's like a divorce or not a separation, right? And God and humanity keeps trying to come back together forever. And the best book in the Bible that that tells that story. Let's see if you know which book that in the beginning the rabbis didn't want to even include it in the canon.
Hosea?
No,
No.
it's a love story. The love story, the
Esther?
Song of Songs?
the Song of Songs. Very good. The Song of Songs
Yeah.
is the description of that romantic relationship between God and humanity, that they keep missing each other. Right? She was not home, and then she was home, but she was by the door, and then she missed him, and by the time she opens the door, he was gone. I mean, it's just it's a beautiful story, but it's also a story of we keep missing each other. But at the end, there'll be a point where we'll come back together forever. Right? So God is telling us, if you want to now have a journey that will lead you back to the tree of life, I'm giving you a satellite tree of life. If you follow that, you'll get back to the Garden of Eden, to the opening of the Garden of Eden back. It may be a long journey, but it'll start here. I'm giving you a little bit of a heads up because this is the intro to building the sanctuary, and in our next sessions we'll go into the nitty-gritty details. But the Ark of the Covenant, which is in the Holy of Holies, right? We say that to come back to God is holy, holy, holies. It had the yard, it had the holy, and the Holy of Holies. And in the Holy of Holies, there was one thing, the Ark of the Covenant, which could be accessed only one day a year by one person. So one place, one holy time, and one holy person. So on Yom Kippur, the high priest would go in and would be able to be in the presence of the Holy Ark. That Holy Ark, we'll read, of course, how it was structured. It housed the Ten Commandments, the tablets, and the broken tablets, right? Too. But what's on top of it? On top of it, and if you use our book, you'll see that there's an illustration on the bottom of page 447. There was the cover of the ark that had the two, literally the same words, like the two angels, but the cherubs, the two cherubim that were on the top of the ark facing each other. And God tells us, I will be speaking to you from between the two cherubim. Meaning I'm not in a physical place. I'm in the conversation, the breath, so to speak, the look, the relationship between those two cherubim. The cherubim were the ones when Adam and Eve were expelled from the Garden of Eden. What did God do? He said, I'm going to now have to protect the entrance to the Garden of Eden with cherubim, with the flipping swords. These will protect the Garden of Eden. And I'm going to introduce one more idea, and then we'll open it for question, because I think was enough introduction for one day. What is it between the two cherubim? The Talmud tells us that they looked like two children, two angelic creatures, and they faced each other. This is the most important thing. And there's a discussion about in the Talmud that when Israel did the wrong thing, these cherubim were not looking at each other. So when the high priest went on Yom Kippur to see, what was he looking to see? The state of the union.
Yeah, okay.
Are we looking at each other? Are we in good shape? Is our heart in the right place? And what does that mean that God speaks to us from the between? That means that there's a conversation. It's a matter of speech. It's about speech. God created this world with speech. The only thing that he gave man that did not give other animals is speech. We have words. It's all about the words, the breath. We create the world with speech. What we need to correct is our speech. That is what will bring us back into the Garden of Eden. Our speech. And only speech can go through the flipping fiery swords. Can't be anything physical because it'll melt. It's the speech. And that's the key. So the whole structure of God coming to earth and giving us the satellite Garden of Eden so we can start following until we get to where we're ready to go back into the Garden of Eden and the tree of life that will give us back our infinity, is a whole mechanism of correcting our speech. And the rest we'll look into in the next sessions. We'll see in every specific item that is used in the temple to build it, the way it's built. It's not just, there was a whole process, but it was a process. I'm giving you like a little heads up. It's like building a family project with love. So even the planks are going to be speaking to each other, are going to have some sort of relationship with each other. Beautiful. It's for me, it really is one of the most beautiful sections in the whole Torah. And by the way, this is now what we're entering is the section, the longest section in the whole Bible. There isn't a section in the Bible, the whole Bible, including the New Testament, that is described in this length. The story of creation, the whole creation, has 30 verses. This has over 300 verses, 10 times. So the creation of the sanctuary of God on earth is the heart of everything. The heart of, as we said, and that is why it's described the longest. It repeats itself 3 times. One is when God describes what he wants to be done to Moses. Then Moses conveys it to the people, and then the people actually doing it. So we're going to start entering the secrets, a secret world. You can look at it on the practical level. Oh, they're putting the hammer here and the planks here and they're cutting the fabric. No, we're not gonna read it this way. We're gonna read it in a way that will reveal the secrets of how God wants us to enter back into the Garden of Eden, and it starts from the beginning, not when the house is complete. It's when you put the first foundational stone, the cornerstone, is when you start. And we'll look at all that in the next sessions.
Now, one of the things that I really smacked me in the head when I started getting more into what was in the temple. And once you got into the Holy of Holies, and then the Holy of the Second Holies, so the inner chamber, then there was the Holy of Holies. So in this outer chamber was where they would offer the sacrifices in front of the Ark of the Covenant. But in this space were two other structures, two other adornments. One was the menorah, and the other was the showbread. So there were two other items that were created. We start to hear how they were supposed to be made. And so every time I hear three, where my head goes, right? Trinity. So here you go, right there. Foreshadowing the revelation here for Christians. We have the Father represented by the ark, the Son represented by the showbread. Showbread were 12 loaves of bread that would be changed every week, and the priests would eat the showbread. And so that was on the right, I think it's on the right side, and then on the left side would be the menorah. So you have the Father, the Son, the showbread, and the menorah is the Holy Spirit, the light. So isn't that amazing too? We're going to hear all about that as we go into this. So we're entering now into the temple, with the construction of the temple, the idea first, the words that God gave, how to construct this. And it was built temporarily, of course, in the tent of meeting, there's all kinds of details, even how it's called a vav, it's a letter, and it's the golden nails, the golden spikes that held the tent, so bringing down heaven to earth. And the vav looks like this. It looks like a nail, and it's the sixth letter. Then you get into all these interpretations. The vav represents the man. Adam and Eve created on the sixth day. And even the symbolism of what that looks like, a man standing with his head bowed toward God. Amazing, beautiful. So there's a million interpretations. Holy mackerel, it's just so rich. You hardly ever get to the end of it. But so the vav was they were called vav, the vav that would pull the tent, pulling heaven and connecting it to earth. So they were the connectors, the man. So we are God's creation in this world, connecting God to the earth.
Yeah, and since you mentioned it, I'm just gonna give a little bit of a heads up. What we'll start next time is with the creation of the first vessel. And what was the first vessel to be created? The Ark of the Covenant. So it's going again from the heart out. That's right, we said that this is from now on, this is the movement that will be for forever. So the Ark of the Covenant, so think of like light that's supposed to reflect out. So from the center, reflect out, light upon the nation, right? So the whole structure is like the word, but the word is breath, is the fire, the light. So the whole structure is the container of light. God can't be contained physically, but the light. So even the word for Aaron, the ark, the root of the word ark in Hebrew is light. So it's a container of light. That's how you're supposed to think about it. From the Holy of Holies, holy and outward. You had a question?
Yeah, just in the future, I was wondering,
whether the ark was destroyed in when the temple was destroyed.
So the question is whether the ark was destroyed. We don't know because we don't know where it is. It could have been most likely was hidden before when they kind of knew that destruction is imminent. They probably hid it, so it's probably hidden somewhere. That's our assumption. The what? Indiana Jones. That is a very good. If you watch that last scene of that movie, Indiana Jones, when they find it and they try to open it, right, with the light coming out and they melt, and it's a very good. Yeah, somebody did a very good research on that, very knowledgeable. So you have to remember that it was already hidden during the first temple, and the second temple did not have the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah. So it does say
very
something
important.
about Jeremiah. When Jeremiah knew, he prophesied that the temple is going to be destroyed.
Right.
So it seems there's no indication clear, but it seems he was alerting people because it's going to go down. It's going down. And so perhaps he hid it. Now there's one tradition that it's gone to Ethiopia,
Yes.
that the Ethiopian Christians there have it in a monastery that nobody can go into. I don't know why not. I'd like to take a peek, but anyway, there's one tradition there.
Well, if you're
Another
going to take a peek, the next
That-
thing
God, I
they'll
melt.
have a McDonald's next to it. Yeah.
So there's one tradition there, then some have said it's on the Temple Mount, but hidden in some cave somewhere that has it. And because again, with the Muslim control of the Temple Mount, we're not allowed to explore. So there are some ways that there's some places where they're digging around, the Israel, archaeologists are doing some, but they don't have free reign to go look around. So it could be hidden there. Now, the third idea, it's back in heaven, because, and if you look at Book of Revelation, chapter 11 ends, and then chapter 12 begins with, in heaven, the Ark of the Covenant appeared, a woman clothed with the sun, and it goes right into Mary, and Catholics use that for a whole theology of Mary as the new Ark of the Covenant. So you have the Ark of the Covenant containing the words of God, and then Our Lady becomes the new Ark of the Covenant containing the Word of God made flesh. So you have all this stuff building upon, one layer of meaning and interpretation.